Hi, I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. Real pleasure to have you here with us in London for the presentation of this amazing film. If one of you just kick off with a brief introduction to the film, what can audiences expect when they watch Hilma?
This is a biopic about Hilma af Klint, the Swedish mystic and artist. And I think you can expect to learn a lot about the incredible storyline and also social context behind Hilma and her work, the other women that she collaborated with, the influences in her life like Theosophy and Rudolf Steiner, and ultimately the decision to not publish her work and how it took, many, many, many years, decades later, for her work to be recognised in the way that it is now, finally, today.
And can you each tell us a little bit about your characters? Tell us a bit about...
I couldn't have said it better.
And who do each of you play? And tell us a bit about how you prepare to play your characters.
I play Matilda Nielsen, who founded Spiritual Magazines and Societies and was part of a group that called themselves The Five, who were women that collaborated with Hilma for 10, 20 years.
I play Sigrid, who started off as the primary channel of the group when they were doing the seances, and then kind of handed it over to Hilma. But yeah, she was the first portal.
And I play Rudolf Steiner, Austrian philosopher and self-proclaimed mystic who had a very strong influence on Hilma throughout her life, and who still has a very strong influence on us today with all the Waldorf schools and kindergartens.
And it seems incredible that this story's never really fully been told, but also she's never really been fully appreciated for her art. The history books haven't gone back and been rewritten, as she was the kind of original abstract artist. So what did it mean to you kind of to jump on board with this project, and particularly for the director, such a personal project, bringing along his wife, his daughter, so kind of like a real family project. So what was the appeal for each of you in being involved?
Well, I've always been a big fan of Lasse Hallström's work. He's been one of my favorite directors for a long time, and I was familiar with some of the works of Hilma, and I think I thought it was a great idea to finally make a film about her, because her work is so unique and it's enigmatic. It deserves, the story deserves to be told.
I'm kind of amazed by the fact that I didn't know anything about Hilma. I'd seen pictures of her work, but I didn't know anything about her and her story until this project came to me. And I studied art history at university, so her name just didn't exist in the kind of academic history of art. And yet she arguably and very kind of definitively, I think, is recognized now to be the first Western abstract artist. And so I think it's so wonderful and important that she's finally receiving the recognition she deserves. And I also think that this film does a great job of shining a light on the kind of context out of which that work emerged, and also the other women that she was collaborating with, because it came out of decades of seances and collaborative work. And I think that's really interesting when we consider the impact that's had on art thereafter.
I agree, all of those things. I loved Lasse's work, and I did know about Hilma af Klint in a different context. But I just think the way that she worked in terms of the way she responded to the world and used everything, and the pursuit of not just using objective reality to create, using the unconscious, using spirit, using nature, and I just think that's more important than ever, this kind of like full person response to creating things. And yeah, I'm thrilled that this film is, other people will be able to discover her in that way, and the women who worked with her.
And it's just so beautifully shot, and the period is so incredibly brought to life. But there's also something in the sensibility of the film which seems to reflect kind of her world, and kind of bringing in you know, the beautiful scenery and kind of the elements of her imagination. What was it like being on this set, and what were some of the maybe more challenging moments, but also some of the highlights?
There were no real challenging moments. I felt it was very relaxed. Lasse is like a consummate filmmaker. He's so relaxed about and like in the flow when he's making film. And everyone, like the set design was extraordinary. The costumes were extraordinary. The Ragnar, who was the DOP, yeah, and I agree. Like the way she got under things and over things and around, you know, it was beautifully. It was like very responsive to the material. Yeah, it was a joy. It was just so joyful. It was really, yeah, very relaxed, very like being around all these women and with this subject matter. I mean,
It was joyful.
it was beautiful. Yeah.
That was the word that came to mind for me. Like it was very joyful. That was the kind of primary word I thought of when you asked about the experience. It felt like a real delight. Everyone had such positive energy and very kind of collaborative spirit, which is not always the case making films. So it felt really, really nourishing.
Yeah, I agree with the ladies. No, being in the minority, for once, felt great. No, it was an amazing experience because Maeve just mentioned the set design, and that was really perfect. I mean, especially when you're shooting a period film, and set design is really important, and when it's done well, you actually, as an actor, feel yourself transported into this other time, and then that works great. And that was one of the cases where it was really, easy somehow.
And in terms of the takeaways from the film, I guess as we discussed, kind of throwing a spotlight on an artist we perhaps didn't know enough about, but there's also wider themes there about how women, even in their time and still today, aren't recognised for their work. Obviously, there's LGBTQ plus themes of the relationships that she wanted to have. And I guess just, you know, even the small comments that are made, I think really kind of capture something about kind of how women's creativity can be trampled on. And the fact that she internalizes this idea that she needs the approval of a man. And, you know, can't you behave more like a woman? And doesn't this painting look like it could almost have been done by a man? So what do you think some of the themes are that come out and are still very relevant today?
I saw the film for the first time yesterday at the Stockholm premiere, and I was really touched by Lena's performance at the end when you see Hilma much older and frailer, and it's just very touching to see this woman who's been dismissed, ignored, misunderstood, reaching the end of her life, and sort of seemingly like a kind of crazy old lady who's just thoroughly misunderstood. And I think it was touching both because the performance is really great, but also because it felt really familiar. It feels like there are so many women still today in our society and in the past who are just sort of dismissed as being crazy because they're maybe different in some way. And that difference is not being celebrated, it's being belittled. So yeah, I found that very touching to observe. And I know when we were filming it, we sort of made a kind of checked in with ourselves at one point, I remember, as the group of women, the five, that like actually what they were doing in these seances, they'd meet every Friday for many, many years to do these seances, to trying to speak to the spirits, to try and explore science and art and politics, was actually quite dangerous and taboo, and there'd probably be a real sense of kind of secrecy around, not to mention the queer dynamics that were within the group, the kind of sense of secrecy probably within that container, which we know also maybe have influenced the fact that they didn't show the work, and it's documented that the conversations they had about, you know, needing to keep their work secret, that they were living in a society that was not particularly tolerant of women in general, and particularly women who were doing things that were quite radically different to the status quo. So I think that's something we tried to feel into in the process of making it.
Give complete answers.
Sorry.
Well, I haven't watched the film yet, so I'm only going to see it tonight for the first time. Yeah, I mean, I think Lily already said everything that's important. I mean, society has definitely come some ways since Hilma's days, but the battle for equality has not been totally won yet. So yeah, there's still ways to go.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all that with us. I really can't wait for everyone else to see the amazing film, and of course enjoy your premiere this evening. Thank you.